Today's episode of On Orbit is brought to you by AVL Technologies, an industry-leading manufacturer of multiband and multi-orbit satellite communications ground terminals for military, government, and commercial applications. Based in Asheville, North Carolina, AVL's visionary approach to engineering and designing mobile satellite antenna technology incorporates customer collaboration, along with superior service and support to ensure that customers' requirements are met for today's most important missions. AVL products feature reflector sizes ranging from 60 centimeters to 5 meters and enable efficient and cost-effective voice, video, and data connectivity without the need for specialized training. For more information on AVL's reliable and rapidly deployable multi-band, multi-orbit satellite systems, visit avltech.com. That's avltech.com. Thank you so much to AVL Technologies for supporting today's episode. And now, on to the interview.
In this episode, I'm joined by Ashley Johnson, Planet CFO and President, for a conversation about how satellite data contributes to transparency for peace and security, and how Planet works with partners to accelerate the impact of its data. Ashley shares the successes of some specific partnerships that have reduced tropical forest loss and mapped the impact of climate change on vulnerable populations. When there are so many impactful use cases for satellite data, Ashley gives some insight into how Planet actually decides which ones to focus its resources on. And we talk about the business impact as well. As CFO and President, Ashley tells her team that they have to do well in order to do good, emphasizing that Planet needs to be financially sound in order to have the greatest impact for good. I'm Rachel Jewett, and you're listening to On Orbit, the podcast that asks, what's our future in space? Ashley, welcome to the On Orbit podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so I'm excited to hear more about you and talk about some of Planet's interesting use cases and partnerships around climate change. So
let's dive in.
Yeah, so you've been with Planet for more than 4 years. Looks like you joined in 2020 before Planet went public, but your background is not in the space industry. You were with a banking service company, Wealthfront, before. So I wanted to ask, what drew you to join a space company?
Yeah, I guess this is a point where I have to be honest and say that I actually joined Planet almost in spite of the fact that it was a satellite or a space business. I knew of the company through friends and colleagues. I actually went to college with Steve Jurvetson, who was one of the investors in Planet. He had called me about the opportunity a couple years before I joined. And then actually our current senior vice president of finance and I had worked together at a prior company. So I had a lot of connective tissue to the business. But really what attracted me to Planet was the importance of this company in international affairs, and particularly the opportunity to contribute to transparency in service of peace and security, and also very drawn to the sustainability element and just really making visible all of the damage that we as humans are doing to the planet so that hopefully collectively we can take action. So it was really, once I got to know the company, the mission drew me in, and we often talk about the fact that once you hear about that, the gravitational pull is very strong.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I like that you said that it was kind of in spite of the fact that you were drawn to the mission, not just because, space is cool.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up as somebody who watched all the space shuttles. My mom was actually working at NASA in the 60s.
Oh, wow.
So I grew up in Texas, near Houston. And so I had, always had familiarity with space, but I viewed it as, something more along the lines of people who were doing mathematics around satellite balancing and load balancing. My mom was a trajectory analyst, a computer back in the day. So that's really how I thought about space. And I didn't really think of that as in line with my background, which was, I have a master's in international policy and then, went to work in investment banking and investing. So I hadn't realized that there was a really interesting opportunity for somebody with my kind of background to actually get involved with a space company. And now that I'm here, it's hard to imagine doing anything else.
That's super interesting. And yeah, it just goes to show that the space industry needs all kinds of roles, needs business people, finance people, not just the technical side. That's super
Absolutely.
interesting. So recently you were named president in addition to your role as CFO. So what does that mean and what are your additional responsibilities now as president?
Yeah. So I was previously Chief Operating Officer and CFO, which was a role that I had held at Wealthfront as well. Essentially, what that is, it gives me the opportunity to tie our financial operations and data to the core operations of the business, with a really strong focus on systems and putting data in the hands of decision makers. So today, as president and CFO, my role expands to include all of our go-to-market organizations, so oversee the commercial sales team, marketing team, software, impact, and our product teams. And so what that really means is I get to go a little deeper on things I already considered key to my role, which is, again, putting data in the hands of decision makers. But now I can ask a lot more questions when I see things differently than maybe what I would expect. And I can partner with these incredible leaders to figure out where these data points might be indicators of strategic changes that we may want to implement. So in other words, my job is a lot more fun. I feel like I'm having an impact, not just on supporting the company's strategy, but also really helping to shape it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how has it been in the last few months and what are your goals for the year?
Yeah, so it's been exciting. We've been obviously using some of the lenses on the business to think about what's really working well and what's taken longer than we expected. We've talked a lot on our earnings call about a couple of factors. So one is the commercial market has been slower to develop than we had originally anticipated, and yet we are seeing a lot of green shoots, and we still have a lot of opportunity in using AI on our PlanetScope data to do broad area management, which has a lot of applicability to any corporation, obviously. Agricultural companies that we had been working with, we can already do a lot more with them. And it's unlocking a side of the government market that goes well beyond high resolution, but also, again, leveraging AI on PlanetScope. So our focus in the last few months has really been understanding what does all of this mean in terms of how we're allocating our resources, so our investment dollars, our time, our people. How do we do it in a way that's going to be both efficient and highly effective, generate high ROI? And we've been very public about putting out a target for getting to EBITDA profitability this year in Q4. And so really helping the team understand what does that mean for them? How can they change the way that they're operating in service of this goal? And everybody really understanding that the reason that goal is so important is because it's the first step towards being cash flow positive. And at the point where we're cash flow positive, we are a business that is fully in control of its destiny, and we can go do all of the great things we want to do. So kind of a catchphrase we're using is we've got to do well. We've got to do well in order to do good. And so let's make headway on these milestones for doing well in service of the mission that we all want to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's been really interesting the past few years to watch Planet and other companies like Spire and Rocket Lab, the companies that went public that have, been pretty successful with it, how much you guys have grown, and then to also get so much more insight as journalists and as the public, our readers. It's just been really interesting the past few years.
Yeah, there are definitely pros and cons of being a public company, and one of the pros is how we're doing is very transparent. Yeah. And so when we're doing well and we have a strong balance sheet, our customers get to see that, and that tends to inspire confidence.
So I want to dig a little bit into climate solutions, and obviously, like, it's in the name of the company, Planet, like it's right there out front. But how would you describe the company's commitment and vision to impact climate change and be a part of climate solutions?
Yeah, I mean, really, since Planet's founding, bringing attention to global change has been at the heart of what we do. So our mission is still to make global change visible, accessible, and actionable. And really what we're doing is working with our partners and customers to bring forward solutions around climate, around reducing deforestation, enabling governments to respond in climate crisis situations, enabling insurance companies to think about how to plan for the increasing risk and occurrence of climate catastrophes. And obviously working with a ton of research organizations on understanding how changes are impacting things like biodiversity, our oceans, our coral reefs, and everything else that's ultimately going to impact our economies and our way of life. Our way of life.
Yeah, it's absolutely critical. I wanted to dig in a little bit on that. So I wanted to ask about, there was a partnership with Norway's International Climate and Forest Initiative, and you mentioned deforestation. And so can you talk a little bit about working with that organization and what the use case looks like there?
Yeah, that's a really exciting program that we've had in place now for almost 40 years. So Norway's International Climate and Forestry Initiative, we call it NICFI, it just is a little easier to say. They're effectively using tropical forests to help reduce and reverse the impact of climate change. So if you think about it, these tropical forests are really the hearts and lungs of the planet. So they absorb carbon dioxide, they release oxygen. And so deforestation in these areas is particularly impactful with respect to global warming and climate change. What we're doing is producing monthly base maps for these global tropical forests and making this data available to NGOs and researchers, scientists, and governments so that they can understand the pace of deforestation, where it's transpiring. For governments, in a lot of cases, they don't even realize that this is happening. And so it gives them the opportunity to go in and respond and take action, particularly against illegal deforestation. And for a lot of the partners that we're working with in research institutions, it enables them to surface opportunities for action to be taken. So it can be helpful for governments in terms of figuring out ways that they can create alternate economies. Costa Rica, for example, has received payments for north of 10 million metric tons of carbon that they're, capturing with reducing deforestation. The Rainforest Foundation has facilitated the training of over 35 indigenous communities in the Amazon on the use of Planet NICFI data to combat deforestation and illegal mining, which is a real problem. So it's an exciting program. We're nearing the end of our fourth year and really hopeful that this program will continue into the future because we've seen real positive impact from the partnership.
Wow, I can only imagine how much data that is over 4 years if it's capturing every single month, the changes.
That's right. And the fact that we've got the data going back in time as well. So it's not just, the data that we're capturing every day, but we've actually been building this global database over the last 7+ years. And it's a very uniform data set, so it lends itself very well to machine learning. So by producing these base maps, which is uniform data set, providing the data over time, you really can run change detection scenarios using machine learning and AI techniques that enable these insights to come to people who can take action really quickly. So a lot of partnerships that we've been doing are looking for patterns that indicate that something is happening where people can intervene and reverse the current course.
Yeah. And is that something where NICFI takes the lead on bringing in new NGOs to work with and disseminating the data? How does the relationship work there?
Yeah, so it's actually a partnership with a number of different players that are coming together. So NICFI is bringing both the reach and the access, as well as the funding to the program. We work with other partners as well that are bringing capabilities to enhance the data and enhance the accessibility of the data for the researchers that are running these analytics.
Very cool. Then there is another one with Microsoft and the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington, where Planet is helping to map climate vulnerable populations. So could you tell me a little bit more about that one?
Yeah. that again is a great example of where we're bringing together different players that have different capabilities. So working with IHME on the analytics that they have around movements of people and health metrics. AI for Good, which is part of Microsoft's part of Microsoft, is bringing analytical models as well as compute capabilities, and we're bringing a lot of really robust data into the equation. The use case, if you think about it, is really profound. In most of the global South countries, these governments are working with very limited funds and tracking movements of population and understanding where people are. They're starting with data that's incredibly dated. Census data that might have been taken 10 plus years ago, in some cases, never been taken. And then they're being asked to respond to just an increasing number of climate catastrophes. That can be flooding, that can be drought, fire response, whatever it might be. But they don't even know how many people might have been impacted by a situation. So what we're able to do is through these analytics, bring an estimation of what the population was of any area prior to something occurring that the government may need to respond to. So if a flood happens, we're able to see, well, what were the constructs that existed there? So buildings, those types of things. And what is the indication of the amount of people that were likely impacted by that event? It's also incredibly helpful when you think about one of the things that climate change is causing is outbreaks of malaria in areas that previously did not have that challenge. But because of the change in soil and rainfall and those types of things, you're seeing pooling of water in places that didn't previously have malaria problems, but now they are seeing these outbreaks. But again, without accurate census data, understanding how many people might be at risk and how the government needs to respond to that is really difficult. So this new index that we're able to bring to these end users is really helpful for understanding, vaccination response, disease outbreak, response to climate crises in places that absolutely need it the most.
That's amazing that can be so impactful for something that is like just visually capturing what's happening on the ground from space, that it can inform all of those issues. That's just that's so amazing.
Yeah, I was really fascinated. I was in Africa a little over a year ago, and met with a number of government leaders. And whether I was speaking to somebody in the defense side of government or somebody in more of like census or statistics monitoring, when I asked, what were the biggest challenges, almost universally, they talked about the impact of climate change on their countries and factors like drought and famine, and monitoring what that meant in terms of where people were migrating and what challenges were emerging as a result of it. So if you think about, somebody worried about borders and defense, if you've got a constant movement of people, whether that's from the surrounding countries because of famine and drought or people in your own country, that's when you end up with conflict where the governments have to be able to respond. So it is absolutely top of mind for pretty much any facet of government, particularly in these regions.
Yeah, and it sounds like that is the perfect situation for commercial satellite imagery to, be in high definition, be collected often so that you can see how the situation is changing. Like, you're not going to get that use case from historical or looking at something once a year.
That's exactly right. And you think of the cost of things like airplane flyover data, or sending people out to try to do census. It's very costly. The ability to do it more than one or even once a year may not exist for these places. A lot of these places are remote and hard to reach, and in other cases, quite dangerous. So we can capture that image at medium and high resolution. They can do analytics on top of this data that enables them to know what happened as recently as yesterday, which is really groundbreaking.
Is this a partnership that can expand and be brought to more areas? Or like, how do you see this evolving over time?
Yeah, I mean, I would say with all of these partnerships, these create opportunities for us to do more in a lot of different places. We spoke briefly about Microsoft's AI for Good lab. We had worked with them on a road and building, a building damage assessment model back when the war in Ukraine broke out, so that we could understand what types of buildings were damaged and how many people were likely affected. And that model took, I want to say, a couple of months to develop on top of PlanetScope data. But once it was built, we were able to use it within a couple of days when the earthquakes hit in Turkey and Syria. And then when the fires broke out in Lahaina, it was a matter of hours, right? So the exciting thing about what's happening is we're capturing what's going on around Earth every single day. So we're imaging the entire landmass of the Earth daily. With these new AI models, you can take that data and apply these models to anywhere on Earth when something has happened. So again, it's really changing the shape of Earth observation from space, from looking at things you already know you needed to look at, to having access to information in areas where you didn't even know you needed to be. And we do it so affordably because our business model is, we're capturing this data and we're selling it to many. So this one-to-many opportunity means we're monetizing the data from these satellites in a very scalable, high gross margin way. And that means that we can service customers of all types, from education and research packages that we develop to bring this data into our education facilities and people who are learning how to use this data, to people who are building applications on top of the data, to NGOs who are holding governments to account, and to governments that know that they need to take action. So it's a very scalable business model, and it enables us to serve a broad community of users and to do it globally.
Yeah. So when something it has all this potential to scale, you're collecting all this data. There are so many different situations that it can be applied to. How do you decide which ones to actually pursue? And this is a product, we're going to create the AI model for this, or we're going to work with this partner to really dig into this specific situation. How do you make those decisions?
Yeah, you're hitting on one of the challenges, one of the more fun challenges of working at a company like Planet, where we are definitely spoiled for choice in terms of where we could have impact, problems we could solve, and partners that we could work with. But we are also a relatively small company, and we have to grow responsibly. And so that means that we do need to think about where we're going to deploy our efforts and our limited resources to have the greatest impact. So from a partner perspective, when we're going to actually be committing resources, we're seeking to evaluate what is it that partner brings to the table, how scalable is the opportunity that they want to pursue, and do we really have the ability to solve the problem that they want to solve? So, satellite data has a lot of practical uses, but also some limitations. And so we need to also make sure that we're bringing to the table an understanding of where we can have the best impact, and then what needs to be true in order for that to happen. So we evaluate these partnerships really, really carefully. But we've launched recently our Planet Insights platform, which is really meant to make our data available at scale to a broader community, so that there's opportunities where we're going to be directly involved and we're going to deploy resources and we're going to be very deeply invested. But also we're building out this platform and partner ecosystem so that we're also not a bottleneck, and we can enable all of these partners who have really exciting ideas to either play with the data in the sandbox and understand how it might be useful to them, or build applications and go and market them themselves. So it really is a two-pronged strategy, but where we're going to be investing resources, it's really understanding, how strong is the partner? Do we have the right set of capabilities that we've brought to the table? And is this a broad-reaching opportunity where we can really see our business scale alongside of the scale of impact?
Thank you for the perspective there on how you work through those decisions, because yeah, that is when it has so many applications, like you said, that's one of the challenges is what do you put resources to? But it sounds like the new platform that you mentioned,
Planet Insights platform, yeah.
and Insights, yes, that's also a really interesting option.
Yeah. I'm happy to provide an example,
Sure.
if it's helpful at all of
Absolutely.
like, where we bring these partners together. I know we talked a little bit about that with NICFI and the Microsoft partnerships. We launched one recently that you might find interesting, around what we call the Nature Tech Alliance. So this is a new initiative where we've partnered with ERM, which is a global consulting firm in the sustainability space, pretty much the leading sustainability consultants. Salesforce, which I assume most people know Salesforce, but many people might not realize that their founder, Mark Benioff, has a very strong commitment to biodiversity protection. And then Nature Metrics, which is a world leader in delivering nature data and intelligence. So again, you can kind of see, all right, there's different capabilities that are being brought to the table that will enable planet data to be used in a really unique and innovative way. And in this case, it's really in a mission to transform how global corporations are measuring and managing their impact, in particular their impact on biodiversity. So it was an initiative, an alliance that was announced at the World Economic Forum annual meeting in Davos, and really it's meant to help businesses understand, one, what impact they are having, but two, how they can be ready for some of the new nature regulation and frameworks that are coming online, such as the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, TNFD, or corporate sustainability and reporting directives. So there's a lot of new frameworks coming on. There's some really exciting regulations that are coming, that have been announced and that will hopefully go into effect later this year, including things like the European Union's deforestation-free regulations, that really is going to require companies to understand their supply chains and the impact that they're having on some of these really important climate factors and planet factors like biodiversity. And we know that we can be a really important part of that, but we also can't build all of that last mile solution for companies. So it's alliances like these that enable us to bring all of the capabilities together, the technology, the data analytics, and the consulting, to build those, the very specific solutions that companies are going to need. And for us, again, when you think about what I cited as how do we think about where to deploy our own resources, this is the right set of partners and capabilities. And this enables us to think about how we can open up a market around something that we think is really, really important for the planet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, like you said, that Planet can't build the full thing for every single use case, but those partners bring that additional expertise, and like that's how it all works together. And that sounds like a use case or a development that has a lot of potential to grow in the future and be really impactful as we are seeing more of these regulations and companies are trying to be more intentional about what their impact is. So that's very cool that Planet's involved with that.
Yeah, we're very excited about it.
Yeah, so this is kind of off of that question, but are you seeing a greater demand for governments and corporations to invest real money in tech and solutions to monitor their climate impact or have a positive impact themselves?
I mean, absolutely. I think the key is with the data that we're able to bring to the table, it really is opening up opportunities for governments to think about how they can do programs at scale that will be in service of these types of initiatives and also enable them to provide the right carrots and the right sticks to the businesses on the end, whether that's an agricultural business and farmer or a corporation that is sourcing these goods into their products. You want to you want to be able as a government to offer the right balance of incentives, but also you need to be able to enforce them. And so I think we're really shifting the paradigm on that front. A great example is some of what we're seeing over in Europe, and work, for example, that we've been doing with the Rural Payments Agency. They're attempting to do broad area management across all of England to be able to pay out incentives to farmers for doing sustainable agricultural practices and sustainable tilling. And you think about that from a from a government perspective, it's great to be able to offer this to all of the farmers across the country and to give them an incentive to change their business practices, some of which have been entrenched over, decades, and give them a reason to do it. But then as you're thinking about for being responsive to your taxpayers, you want to know that you're actually paying out incentives to those farmers that are actually doing it. And so how do you do that at scale? That's really where you need data like what Planet can bring. You need the daily scan of what's going on, or at least a high frequency scan, but you need it at a high enough resolution that you can be tracking at the smallholder farmer level. And so with these types of partnerships, like what we have in place with the Rural Payments Agency, where we enable them to do this type of broad area management, pay out subsidies and pay out these incentives and pay them out faster than ever. And that really also drives the behaviors to spread faster than ever, because when the farmers then say, wow, this is actual money coming in, they're going to do it more, they're going to take more action. So we see this happening in real time as part of incentive program. We're also seeing it happen in places where they're particularly worried about climate catastrophes, and they need to be able to figure out how they can take action that will help protect their constituents. And so an example of that would be work that we're doing with the government of New South Wales and a partner that we have in the area called NGIS. They're using Planet data for insights into the movement of fires and vegetation changes before, during, and after an event to enable critical decision making. And again, a lot of time the decision making is while things are happening or shortly after, to understand how they do response to the climate catastrophe. But also they want to be able to learn what happened. So they need to be able to look back in time, assess what may have led up to the degree of impact from that climate catastrophe, from that fire, whether that's land surface temperature measurements, whether that's concentration of fuel load in the fire. So did they need to do more forest clearing to prevent it from breaking out somewhere else? Understanding of where communities maybe have been developing closer to places that are high risk. So we're partnering a lot with governments right now, which is enabling them to do more at scale to drive the right behaviors to the end across their constituents, and also to make sure that they're being responsive to the changes that are happening. And we firmly believe as we get embedded in the operational infrastructure of these governments, in driving these incentive programs, and also in doing these enforcement actions before, during, and after events, corporations are going to have to be using that same data to understand how they fit into all of this. We're seeing this happening with insurance companies.
Insurance, yeah.
They're looking at this kind of data and saying, well, we're impacted as well. And so we need a better understanding of what are the factors that are leading to these situations. And ultimately, we're going to face a situation where insurance companies can no longer insure against the amount of claims that they're having to pay out. The equation's just not working anymore when you see climate catastrophes moving from every couple of years to multiple per year. It's not affordable. As you see insurance companies leaving markets as a result of that, governments have to step in. Governments are ultimately going to say, we should not be footing this bill. We should be passing this bill along to those up the value chain that are actually causing the situation to be as it is. And that, I believe, will really drive a faster difference in how you're seeing corporations being forced to take action. So I apologize. That was a very long answer.
No, that was great. I mean, a lot of interesting things in there. You mentioned how insurance. Yeah, I've been reading about this in the news lately. Like, people in Florida can't get their homes insured, and then how, like you said,
ultimately the
governments don't want to foot that bill.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah, we see that in California actually quite a bit, where if insurance companies are forced to provide insurance in places where it's not worth it to them, they would rather just pull out of the state than be forced to take on unprofitable business. And that puts the government in a pretty tricky situation in terms of how do you then make sure that your constituents can get the insurance that they need. So change is not moving at the pace that we would like to see it. But we are a very important part of making the importance of this visible and actionable to government, which will ultimately drive the change in broader ecosystem.
Okay, yeah. So I get what you're saying, that you think government business is going to drive to commercial in that area, because
Absolutely.
defense is the historic anchor customer for satellite imagery, and there tends to be more money in that than these other things. Even though the climate stuff is absolutely critical, you have to balance, closing the business case.
That's right.
As well as providing the solutions.
Yeah. And, one of the things that I think Planet has done particularly well is having a vision for the broader impact that we want to have, and understanding how peace and security actually plays into that same set of requirements. And again, I already mentioned how in some areas it is absolutely intertwined. What's happening in the climate is the same priority that they have on the peace and security side. They are absolutely connected. But we've also seen how applications of our technology really span different end users that bridge both defense and commercial applications. One great example of that is there's a partner that we work with called Synmax that built a really interesting AI on top of our data in open water for tracking dark shipments. So ships that turn off their transponders, you can no longer track them using AIS data, but they could track them using PlanetScope's daily imagery and doing analytics on top of it to understand what type of vessels were where, marrying that with AIS data and deriving insights. Originally, the application was built for traders, hedge funds, that wanted to understand impact on commodity markets and oil prices. That data ended up being really interesting in a more military application. So it's that same partnership that recently enabled us to have a win with the Navy in a Sea Vision award.
Yeah.
And that same data can be used for tracking illegal fishing activity. So if you want to understand illegal fishing, boats that are in an area where you don't expect them to be, that same capability can be used for that, very much an environmental application. So the fact that we are capturing all of this data and enabling AI on top of it means that the same application can span a defense application all the way through to an environmental application. And I think that that's very unique to Planet, because again, it's this kind of one-to-many concept. We're not limited in only going after the highest bidder. Somebody that's got a finite asset, right? A high resolution satellite that can only look in so many places at one time is ultimately going to sell to the highest bidder. And typically, you're going to find the highest bidder in the defense side of governments. But that's not our model. Our model is having a one-to-many capability that we can then enable applications across all of the markets, and continue to serve defense customers in a really important aspect in service of peace and security, while also having all of the impact and accessibility across climate change and climate solutions.
Yeah, that's a great point. And just from this conversation, I can really tell that your background in international relations is like perfect for this role.
Oh, you can understand how I'm a bit of a kid in a candy store over here. Yeah.
Yeah. So to wrap us up, I wanted to ask about the Pelican 1 upcoming satellite. So Planet launched a demonstration for Pelican 1 in November, and Tanager is also upcoming. So how will these next generation satellites, Pelican and Tanager, provide better data for climate change and make it easier for customers to take action?
Yeah, it's truly exciting. And I think, again, coming back to just the way that Planet operates, everything that we do has this, has an agility and a scalability angle to it. And I think that's in part because, we try to be a young, scrappy company, but doing really, really important things. So the Pelican satellite that we launched last year was a tech demo that enabled us to test a lot of the capabilities of the satellite in space before we launched the production fleet. That tech demo has been going incredibly well. I'm really impressed with the teams and the work that they've done, and it's our first small bus program. We'd done the smaller satellites that are our super devs. We've had 18 iterations of those, but this was really the first of kind of a larger, for us, still considered a small sat. And the way that we built that bus, it's actually intended to be very flexible in terms of the payload that we put on it. So Pelican has a high resolution payload, taking us from where we are today of 50 to 70 centimeters per pixel down to 30 to 50 centimeters per pixel. And that 30 centimeter resolution is really important for a number of our partners and applications that we do. So very excited at how that program has been progressing, and hopefully we can talk more about the production launch as we get closer to that date. And then for Tanager, that's taking that same satellite bus, but putting in a payload that's a hyperspectral sensor. And in this case, again, coming back to everything that we do, we often do it with an eye to partners. That was a partnership with NASA JPL that had developed this hyperspectral sensor, and a nonprofit called Carbon Mapper, which is really focused on changing policies around methane enforcement. And so it was this three-way partnership that took the IP from NASA JPL around the hyperspectral sensor, Planet's capabilities in building, launching, and managing satellites scalably, so embedding that sensor in that same small sat bus. And then hopefully very, very soon, we'll be sending the first of those satellites into space, leveraging all of the learnings that we've had since we launched the Pelican satellite back in November. And that satellite will enable us to track methane emissions at a much higher fidelity than we've been able to do from space to date. And already the work we've been doing with them has enabled us to detect some super emitter sites that previously weren't known to exist. There are also a number of applications for those satellites around biodiversity, and even some interesting defense applications. So again, these satellites leverage the incredible in-house space systems capabilities we have, and then the mind towards doing things both efficiently and scalably to target a broad range of end markets. So super excited about both of those programs. And it's always fun to wander downstairs to our first floor and see the incredible progress those teams are making.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, and it's so interesting. It's like almost every question, there's almost everything we've talked about, there's an example of how Planet is working with a partner in that area. So I really appreciate your insight into all of that. It's been great to have you on the podcast, Ashley.
Well, thank you so much. It's been really great. And yes, I couldn't agree more. We could not do this without the incredible partner ecosystem we have, and we continue to build out. So thanks for the time.
Yeah, thank you.